In the heart of Singapore, where glowing storefronts once symbolized the future of global consumerism, something strange is beginning to happen. Along parts of Orchard Road, one of the most famous shopping streets in all of Asia, luxury boutiques are quietly disappearing. Hallways that once echoed with the sound of tourists carrying bags from Louis Vuitton, Apple, and Gucci are becoming noticeably quieter. And for the first time in years, some of the world's biggest retail brands are no longer expanding here. They're leaving. What makes this story so unusual is that on paper, Singapore still looks incredibly successful. Tourist arrivals have largely recovered. The skyline still looks futuristic. The airports still rank among the best on earth. And yet beneath the polished image, cracks are starting to appear in the very economic model that transformed this tiny island into one of the richest nations in the world. For decades, Singapore built its identity around one idea: convenience. Everything was designed to make spending money feel effortless. The subway systems led directly into shopping malls. The airports felt more like luxury resorts. Entire districts were engineered around retail, tourism, and premium experiences. At one point, shopping itself became part of the national brand. But now, the world is changing. Tourists are spending differently. Younger consumers are abandoning physical stores. And neighboring countries like Thailand, Malaysia, and Indonesia are suddenly offering experiences that feel cheaper, more authentic, and in some cases, more exciting. The question is no longer whether Singapore remains wealthy. It almost certainly will. The real question is something much deeper. What happens when a country built around the business of consumption discovers that people no longer consume the same way they used to? Because this may not just be the slow decline of a shopping district. It could be the beginning of the end for one of the most successful retail models modern Asia has ever seen. Back in 1965, when Singapore was suddenly separated from Malaysia, almost nobody believed the tiny island had a real future. It had no oil, no major natural resources, and not even enough fresh water to sustain itself independently. Compared to larger Asian nations surrounding it, Singapore looked vulnerable, isolated, and economically fragile. At the time, many outsiders assumed it would struggle just to survive. But instead of trying to compete through agriculture or manufacturing on the scale of larger countries, Singapore made a radically different decision. It chose to transform itself into something the world had rarely seen before, a nation designed almost entirely around efficiency, finance, tourism, and consumption. Over the next several decades, the government aggressively rebuilt the island with one clear goal: make Singapore the easiest place in Asia for global money to enter and circulate. Massive investments poured into infrastructure. Roads became cleaner, airports became faster, bureaucracy became smoother. Businesses were offered stability, safety, and predictability in a region often associated with political uncertainty. In many ways, Singapore began operating less like a traditional country and more like a carefully optimized global corporation. One of the clearest examples of this philosophy was Changi Airport. Most airports are designed simply to move passengers from one flight to another as efficiently as possible. But Singapore approached the idea differently. They turned the airport itself into a destination. By the time projects like Jewel Changi Airport opened, the airport no longer felt like transportation infrastructure. It felt like a giant luxury experience center. Waterfalls, glass domes, designer stores, restaurants, gardens, and entertainment zones were all strategically built to keep travelers inside longer, because every extra minute increased the chances they would spend more money. At the same time, places like Orchard Road became symbols of Asian luxury and aspiration. Huge shopping malls connected directly to subway stations. Air-conditioned walkways allowed visitors to move from one luxury complex to another without even stepping outside. International brands flooded into the city because Singapore had successfully positioned itself as Southeast Asia's premium shopping gateway. If tourists from China, Indonesia, or the Middle East wanted to buy luxury goods in a safe and prestigious environment, Singapore became one of the first destinations they considered. And for years, the formula worked almost perfectly. By the 2000s and 2010s, Singapore had become one of the wealthiest countries on earth, in terms of GDP per capita. Millions of tourists visited every year, not just for sightseeing, but specifically to shop. Buying expensive products in Singapore became associated with status, success, and modern living. The country had effectively turned consumption itself into a lifestyle experience. But beneath all the success, an invisible dependency was quietly forming. Singapore's retail economy became deeply reliant on constant movement, constant tourism, constant spending, constant luxury demand. The entire system depended on people continuing to believe that polished shopping environments and international brands represented the ideal version of modern life. And for a long time, that belief seemed unshakable. The problem is that consumer behavior never stays frozen forever. What people value changes. What feels exciting changes. And sometimes, the very strengths that once made a system unstoppable slowly become weaknesses in a completely different era. Because while Singapore was busy perfecting the business of luxury retail, the rest of the world quietly started looking for something else entirely. At first, the warning signs inside Singapore's retail sector were subtle enough that most people barely noticed them. A luxury store would quietly close. A shopping corridor would feel slightly less crowded on a weekday afternoon. Another international brand would reduce the size of its flagship location instead of expanding it. Individually, none of these moments seemed alarming, but together, they began forming a pattern that was becoming harder to ignore. Along parts of Orchard Road, vacancy rates slowly started climbing higher than what analysts once considered healthy for prime retail districts. Areas that had previously been packed with luxury shoppers suddenly showed empty storefronts hidden behind temporary walls and "for lease" signs. And what made the situation more concerning was that this wasn't happening during an economic collapse. Tourist numbers were recovering after the pandemic. Flights had returned, hotels were still operating, but something fundamental about consumer behavior had changed. One of the biggest reasons was the dramatic shift happening inside China's economy. For years, Chinese tourists had been one of the most important customer groups, fueling Singapore's luxury retail machine. Wealthy travelers and middle-class consumers regularly visited the island to buy handbags, jewelry, watches, and premium fashion products. In many malls, Chinese spending became deeply embedded into the entire business model. But after the prolonged real estate crisis inside China, consumer confidence weakened significantly. Families that once viewed luxury shopping as a symbol of upward mobility suddenly became much more cautious with money. The psychological shift was massive. During the previous decade, carrying expensive international brands often represented status and financial success. But in a slowing economy, visible luxury spending started feeling less practical and sometimes even socially uncomfortable. Many travelers who once spent aggressively overseas now prioritized savings, dining experiences, or shorter vacations instead of luxury purchases. At the exact same time, another problem was quietly destroying the economics of physical retail worldwide: online shopping. Younger consumers increasingly stopped treating malls as places to actually buy products. Instead, stores became testing grounds. People walked in, tried on shoes, checked clothing sizes, held products in their hands, and then ordered the same items online later for lower prices. Physical retail spaces were unintentionally becoming free showrooms for e-commerce platforms. This shift created enormous pressure on businesses operating in Singapore because the cost structure there was already extremely high. Rent in prime districts like Orchard Road remained among the most expensive in Asia. Labor costs continued rising, electricity prices increased, taxes climbed higher. Many luxury brands eventually realized they were spending enormous amounts of money simply to maintain physical presence in locations where actual purchasing behavior was weakening. And perhaps the most dangerous part of all was this: tourists were still visiting Singapore, but they were spending differently. Instead of leaving malls carrying multiple luxury shopping bags, visitors increasingly spent money on short-term experiences, food, attractions, social media photography spots, or airport entertainment. In other words, people still wanted to experience Singapore, they just no longer wanted to consume it the same way. You could already see this transformation happening inside places like Jewel Changi Airport. Millions of travelers still visited to photograph the giant indoor waterfall and futuristic architecture. But taking photos does not necessarily generate the same long-term retail profits as luxury shopping once did. A tourist buying a coffee and uploading Instagram stories cannot financially replace someone purchasing designer watches or premium fashion products. The result is an uncomfortable reality that many retail operators are now being forced to confront. Singapore successfully built one of the most sophisticated shopping ecosystems in the world, but modern consumers are no longer behaving the way that ecosystem was designed for. And once a system built around constant spending begins losing momentum, even small changes in behavior can create very large cracks underneath the surface. For a long time, Singapore operated almost like the uncontested luxury capital of Southeast Asia. If travelers wanted safety, modern infrastructure, premium shopping, and international brands all concentrated into one highly efficient city, Singapore was the obvious choice. But over the last few years, something unexpected started happening across the region. Other countries stopped trying to imitate Singapore and began competing with it directly. Cities like Bangkok and Kuala Lumpur started building massive luxury retail districts of their own. High-end malls, rooftop entertainment complexes, designer boutiques, and five-star hotels began appearing across the region at astonishing speed. But unlike Singapore, many of these destinations still offered something else. Tourists increasingly valued energy, unpredictability, nightlife, local culture, and a feeling that the experience was genuinely unique. Take Bangkok, for example. The city no longer markets itself simply as a cheap tourist destination. Today, it offers luxury shopping centers, high-end restaurants, rooftop bars, riverfront entertainment districts, and premium hotels that rival many global cities. Yet, despite all that modernization, Bangkok still feels alive in a way that many travelers describe as emotionally engaging. Street food vendors sit next to luxury malls. Crowded night markets exist alongside billion-dollar developments. Visitors can move between chaos and luxury within minutes. For many tourists, that contrast feels exciting rather than uncomfortable. And perhaps most importantly, the overall cost remains dramatically lower. A traveler staying in a luxury hotel in Thailand or Malaysia can often spend far less than they would in Singapore while still receiving a premium experience. As inflation and global living costs continue rising, even wealthy tourists are becoming more price conscious. More people are starting to ask a simple question: why spend significantly more money for an experience that may no longer feel significantly better? This is where Singapore faces a serious structural challenge. Its entire identity was built around being cleaner, safer, and more efficient than neighboring countries. But once those neighboring countries modernized and improved their own infrastructure, Singapore's competitive advantage began shrinking. What once felt futuristic now feels familiar. And in tourism, familiarity can become dangerous. At the same time, social media completely changed how people experience travel. Years ago, seeing places like Gardens by the Bay, Marina Bay Sands, or the giant waterfall inside Jewel Changi Airport felt extraordinary because most people had never seen anything like them before. But now, billions of images and videos of these landmarks already exist online. Travelers sitting at home in California, Texas, or Florida can scroll through endless cinematic footage of Singapore without ever buying a plane ticket. Ironically, the more visually perfect Singapore became online, the more it risked losing the sense of discovery that once made people curious enough to visit in person. Many younger tourists now prioritize destinations that feel less polished but more emotionally memorable. They want experiences that appear spontaneous, authentic, and difficult to replicate. And that creates a problem for cities built around carefully engineered perfection. Even luxury brands have started adjusting to this new reality. In the past, companies viewed Singapore as the primary gateway into Southeast Asia. But now brands are opening flagship locations directly in countries with much larger domestic populations like Thailand, Indonesia, and Malaysia. Instead of relying solely on wealthy tourists flying into Singapore, companies increasingly want direct access to millions of local consumers across the region. Meanwhile, countries like Indonesia and tourist destinations like Bali are attracting travelers searching for something Singapore struggles to provide: natural atmosphere, beaches, mountains, open landscapes, spiritual tourism, wellness retreats, and cultural immersion are becoming more attractive in an era where many people already spend most of their lives surrounded by glass buildings and digital screens. And perhaps that is the deeper issue hiding underneath all of this. Singapore mastered the art of building one of the world's most efficient luxury environments. But modern tourists are slowly shifting away from efficiency itself. They are searching for emotion, personality, imperfection, and experiences that feel human rather than engineered. In the past, Singapore's perfection looked futuristic. Today, for some travelers, it risks feeling strangely artificial. The most difficult part of Singapore's retail slowdown is that this is not the type of problem that can be solved simply by building another spectacular attraction or opening another luxury mall. In fact, some analysts believe the country may now be trapped inside the very economic structure that once made it successful. For decades, Singapore's commercial real estate system was built around premium pricing. Prime retail districts like Orchard Road became some of the most expensive shopping zones in all of Asia. Land values kept rising. Rental prices climbed higher year after year. And because the market performed so well for such a long period of time, investors, developers, and real estate trusts gradually began treating constant growth almost like a permanent guarantee. But that model becomes dangerous once consumer demand starts weakening. Today, many businesses operating in downtown Singapore are facing a brutal financial equation. Even if customer traffic remains relatively strong, the actual amount people spend inside stores has changed dramatically. Consumers are becoming more cautious. Tourists are shortening their stays. Younger shoppers increasingly prefer online purchases, yet landlords still need extremely high rental income to justify the enormous value of these commercial properties. This creates a cycle that becomes very hard to escape. Developers renovate aging malls to attract more visitors, but renovation projects cost billions of dollars. In order to recover those investments, rental prices often increase even further. And once rents become too expensive, smaller independent businesses disappear first. That may sound like a minor issue at first, but it creates a much larger cultural problem. Small cafes, unique bookstores, creative fashion shops, local restaurants, and niche businesses are often the very things that give cities personality. When only giant global corporations can afford to survive inside premium retail districts, shopping areas slowly begin losing their individuality. One luxury mall starts looking almost identical to another. This is one of the reasons many younger travelers increasingly describe parts of Singapore as visually impressive but emotionally repetitive. The architecture looks flawless, the infrastructure works perfectly, but some visitors struggle to feel genuine connection inside spaces, dominated by the same international brands they could already find in Dubai, London, New York, or Tokyo. At the same time, local consumer behavior inside Singapore has also shifted dramatically. More residents are spending time and money in suburban malls closer to home instead of traveling into luxury downtown districts. Places centered around supermarkets, clinics, casual dining, gyms, and practical daily services are performing far more consistently than high-end shopping corridors designed primarily for tourists. Rising living costs have accelerated this change even further. After the GST increased to 9% in 2024, many households became noticeably more cautious about non-essential spending. Electricity costs rose, daily expenses increased. Inflation pressures affected everything from dining to transportation. And when people begin focusing more heavily on financial stability, luxury consumption often becomes one of the first things reduced. What makes this especially complicated for Singapore is that the government still believes redevelopment can partially solve the problem. Plans continue emerging to modernize shopping districts, add more green spaces, create entertainment zones, and redesign commercial areas to feel more experience-focused. But critics argue that these efforts may not address the core issue, because the real problem may not be physical infrastructure at all. The deeper problem is that the global definition of value itself is changing. Consumers are becoming harder to impress with expensive architecture alone. Tourists no longer automatically associate luxury shopping with happiness or status the way previous generations once did. And in an economy increasingly driven by digital convenience, emotional experiences, and online commerce, some of the systems Singapore built its identity around are slowly losing the same power they once had, which raises a difficult question very few people openly discuss. What happens when a country designed around selling perfection discovers that the world no longer values perfection in quite the same way anymore? What makes this story so fascinating is that Singapore is probably not heading toward economic collapse at all. The country still has enormous financial reserves, world-class infrastructure, political stability, and one of the most efficient governments anywhere on the planet. In many ways, Singapore remains stronger than most nations could ever hope to become. But that may actually be what makes this moment so historically important. Because what we may be witnessing is not the failure of Singapore itself, but the slow fading of an entire economic era. For decades, the idea of the shopping city dominated parts of global tourism. Cities competed to build larger malls, attract more luxury brands, and create environments where spending money felt like entertainment. During the peak years of globalization, that model worked incredibly well. Rising middle classes across Asia traveled abroad specifically to consume. Luxury products symbolized achievement. International retail became a form of aspiration. But modern consumer psychology is changing faster than many governments and corporations expected. Today, younger generations often place higher value on experiences rather than ownership. Many travelers care more about unique memories than expensive shopping bags. Digital platforms have also transformed how people buy products, removing much of the excitement physical retail once offered. And after years of economic uncertainty, global consumers have become significantly more cautious with money, even when they can technically afford luxury purchases. At the same time, social media has quietly changed the meaning of travel itself. Places no longer feel mysterious for very long because millions of videos instantly reveal them to the world. A futuristic mall or famous skyline can trend globally within hours, but that same exposure also makes it harder to maintain long-term fascination. The internet rewards novelty constantly, and novelty fades quickly. That may be the uncomfortable reality Singapore now faces. The country perfected a model that belonged to a very specific moment in global economic history. And while that model helped transform a small island into one of the wealthiest places in the world, the next generation of tourists and consumers may simply want something different. Not necessarily bigger, not necessarily more luxurious, just more human. And perhaps that is why the empty spaces slowly appearing inside Singapore's malls feel symbolic to so many people. They represent more than declining retail sales. They reflect a much larger shift happening across the modern world, a shift away from pure consumerism and toward experiences that feel personal, emotional, and authentic. The real question now is whether Singapore can reinvent itself once again like it did after 1965, or whether the golden age of the shopping paradise is quietly coming to an end. The empty corridors appearing inside parts of Singapore's shopping districts are not just about retail. They are signs of something much bigger happening across the global economy. For decades, Singapore represented the ultimate success story of modern consumer capitalism, a place where efficiency, luxury, tourism, and shopping blended together almost perfectly. And for a very long time, that formula worked better than almost anyone imagined possible. But the world changes, consumer behavior changes, technology changes, and eventually, even the most successful systems are forced to adapt to new realities. What makes this moment so interesting is that Singapore is not collapsing, far from it. The country still remains one of the safest, richest, and most advanced nations in the world. But what may be fading is the era that turned shopping itself into the center of travel and lifestyle culture across Asia. Today, people increasingly want experiences that feel authentic, emotional, and personal rather than carefully manufactured. And that shift is forcing cities everywhere, not just Singapore, to rethink what modern tourism and consumer culture will actually look like in the future. So now the question becomes very simple. If you had $10,000 for your next trip, would you still choose the polished luxury of Singapore? Or would you rather search for something less perfect, but more unforgettable somewhere else in Asia? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the economic, cultural, and hidden transformations reshaping the modern world.